Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of the Lancaster City Council for November 13th, 2023. It is 6 p.m. The first item we have on our agenda is Resolution 11423, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance, increase receipts and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor and the city of income tax fund. Tax Commissioner Hamilton is already at the podium. Thank you.
Yep, I'm here. This has kind of been a piece that we've done the past few years as we get closer to the end of the year, and I take a look at our revenues and my expense budget, what we've brought in, carried over and such. So what this is, it will be an additional $5 million split. It'll be done in the end of, well, mid-December, depending on when we work that out with the auditor's office. I usually think it's a last-minute thing that we do. It becomes carryover for everybody else. And it's just, we're sitting healthy and we're able to do it and give everybody whose money it is back to them. Police department, parks, everybody on the splits.
Any questions? Again, this is an annual piece. This was additional income tax receipts above what were originally anticipated and have to be divided according to the revenue source that they were generated.
Yep, the voted on and, yep, the 1% as well, correct. Correct.
Questions? Okay, this is coming out of finance, and it will be a 3 readings. Mr. Ailes, will you be the second on that?
Yes.
Next resolution is 11523, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and the income tax fund to cover income tax refund request.
And proportionally, when money comes in, money has to go out a little bit more as well. And this is for some refunds for a few employers, I would say, that kind of made some bigger payments in April with their extensions, and their revenues have come down. So we just have to basically pay back, the difference. So we've had a couple. One was $25,000, another was $20,000. It's not our typical refund that we give out to taxpayers, but these are the business ones that kind of roll in with the October extensions. So
Sounds pretty straightforward. Any questions on that? We'll do 3 readings on 11523. Mrs. Kreitz, would you be the second on that?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is Resolution 11623, a resolution to increase receipts and appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and the Special Improvement District Fund. This is coming out of finance. Auditor Nettles, can you
Yes,
update us?
these are funds that we get through the county auditor during settlement collections. These are special assessments that are collected on real estate taxes for the Special Improvement District that comes through. We received more monies than anticipated. So this is just us appropriating and being able to get the money out to the
SID?
The SID, yes.
So essentially, we're just giving them the money that they're entitled to based on the collections.
Yes, so we're kind of the middle people for the county auditor's office that they collect, send to us, and then we just kind of pass through and disperse out. So we got more money than anticipated, so I need to give them the cash. So I cannot do that till I have
Okay.
the budget spent.
Any questions on 11623? 2 readings on this, Auditor
Yes.
Nettles. Looking at 2 readings, Mr. Ailes, will you be the second on this?
Yes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Resolution 11723, a resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the Public Transit Program Fund for additional unexpected costs in the Lancaster Public Transit as a result of an addition of the 5th loop. Coming out of Public Works, Mr. Schoonover.
Yes, thank you. We got an email from Chaz the other day kind of explaining this. So with different staff issues, whether it was not having enough and needing to move some finances from their different line items for salaries and staff, this is what is needed. So she is here if you have any questions, but I assured her it was pretty self-explanatory, or she did a good job explaining it in the email. right? So we are good here. Mr. James would be my second.
That's
It's
correct.
going to be 3 readings.
3 readings, and Mr. James, second on 11723. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 11823, a resolution to create a new fund, the Transfer Facility Closure Restricted Fund, to set up a revenue and expense account and declare an emergency. This is coming out of finance. You're going to talk about that? Thank you.
Yeah, this is a requirement by the Ohio EPA that we have to set aside, if you remember, I spoke about this on the last council meeting, that I'm required to set a new fund to withhold and set aside cash that the sanitation department has to move over to be in compliance with the Ohio EPA for cleanup if needed, that whole hypothetical of if the sanitation department would close tomorrow, we have to have the cash set aside to help clean up. So that's what this is for.
So it looks pretty straightforward. They're requiring that we do it, and this is the account that allows you to
Yes.
set up the account, and then we
Sean
have
will then.
additional legislation
Yeah,
for, okay,
to
funding.
move the cash over, and then he'll have to monitor it every year with the Ohio EPA of how much, what balance he should have in there.
Okay. Any questions on this? So 2 readings on this also, Auditor Nevels?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Mr. Ailes, will you be the second?
Yes.
On that? Thank you. Next item we have on our agenda is Resolution 11923, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the general fund and declare an emergency. This is out of finance. This is regarding the Chestnut Street parking lot. Kurt, you want to speak about that? Okay.
Good evening. So I'm happy with how the project turned out. I'm disappointed that we were slightly over. There were some unforeseen things. We came across a cistern and we had a sanitary sewer service line that we didn't know about and a roof drain and some other things. But this is some legislation to increase those funds to cover the cost. We have all of the change orders, and this is a final number. That's why it's down to the nearest cent. So we know that this is all it's going to be. We get this paid, and we are finished with the project. I'm happy with the project. That's the extent of it. So 17, I think it's around 17,000. Originally it was $450,000, so that's a modest increase.
Questions for Mr. Shaw? So I'm going to request suspension on this. Mrs. Kreitz, will you be the second? We'd like to get the bill paid.
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is Resolution 12023, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and complete a fund-to-fund transfer in the sanitation fund and declare an emergency. This is coming out of service. Mr. Matlin?
I was just reading this tonight. This appears to be the transfer for the fund that we're creating in the 118. And it says we're going to try to do 1 reading, but why would we do 1 reading for the transfer, but yet 2 readings to create the fund is the only question I have. Does it matter? I mean, I have no trouble with,
Readings for both is fine.
well, I'm the only sponsor in this one, so, but if we do 1 for this, it's still cool to wait 2 for the 118, right? And am I correct? This is just the money?
You are correct. This is
Okay.
just the money, so.
Yeah.
We could do 2 on both of them, get them done at the same time.
Like I said,
If that's all right with the auditor.
That's perfectly fine.
All right.
Mr. Fowler's here, I'm not sure. Is that okay, Sean? Okay. So we're going to do 2 on this, is what you said?
Might as well have them both the same. Either suspend both of them or 2 readings. I'd prefer the 2 readings over the suspension.
Okay. And then it says Ms. Kreitz is my second on that.
Mrs. Kreitz is the second. 2 readings. Next item on our agenda is 12123, a resolution to amend the 2023 appropriations budget and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor, Auditor Nettles.
This is an annual piece that, of course, as we're looking towards the next year's budget, I've sent her on the current year's budget to bring everybody's expense budgets in line with her actual revenue, cash on hand by December 31st. So I'm probably a royal pain to every department, of going in and trying to look and make sure that they're bringing in the cash. If they're not going to, this piece is them lowering their budget to meet their cash anticipation. So this is an annual piece.
Any questions? Again, it's something we do every year. So we're going to have 2 readings on that?
Yes.
What we're showing. Mrs. Kreitz, will you second that?
Yes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Resolution 12223, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Verdantis for engineering services. This is coming out of Water, Wastewater. Mr. James?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman McDaniel. I want to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium to give us just a little bit more on this from an explanation standpoint.
All right, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everybody. So I'll probably reiterate a few things I said via email last week, but again, like the last one, this is an annual piece. We typically submit for an engineering contract with one of our consultants, Verdantis, to do miscellaneous engineering and inspection services needed throughout the year by stormwater, water pollution control, water departments, anything that might be needed that's kind of miscellaneous. We can make use of our contacts there and pay it out of this contract. So the amount here, $150,000, is the same amount we used last year. So just looking to stick with that for the following year. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody needs a little more detail or.
Any questions? Again, this is the same one we do every year.
Yeah, correct. Yes. So yeah, this will be for 2024. Any services needed next year.
Great. Mr. James, what's your pleasure?
We're going to be able to run 3 readings on this.
3 readings, and Mrs. Teener is the second on that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
The next item we have on our agenda is Resolution 12323. It is the 2024 city budget. So we should have all received the budget in our council paperwork. It's a rather extensive document. Hopefully you had a chance to do some kind of quick review of it, but certainly I wouldn't expect everybody to be able to go through it entirely. It's something that certainly over the next 3 readings, hopefully we can have more significant discussions. The first review really is just that. The information's been presented to us. The budget will evolve over the next two readings, and I'm going to let the mayor say a couple things, if he would, about where we are right now and where we're headed.
As Councilwoman McDaniel said, it's the first draft. There will be changes. There are always changes. I would invite you, if you have questions when you go through, to reach out to your department heads or to myself or Service Safety Director Martin or Deputy Service Safety Director Woody, especially to Woody. She gets her feet wet. She can answer all the questions. I will note that there are no pay increases in there for cost of living at this point because we have some other negotiations going on that might affect that. So the only raises that are in there are the step increases for the various employees. So there will be some significant changes. We spent some time this afternoon going through line by line and identifying questions that we had that we need to get information from the department heads. So we'll be working our way through that, and as we get updates, we will send out updated drafts of that document.
So certainly if you have any questions today, feel free to bring them forth. But I think we'll probably primarily have questions on the second and third reading as we progress through the budget process. But as the mayor said, it's going to change because we are going to have the cost of living. Both the collective bargaining and the non-union employees are going to see some cost of living adjustment. Again, we're in negotiations Administration is in negotiation with 5 separate collective bargaining groups, and they're in various stages of negotiations. So that is the reason you're not seeing any of the pay increases in the current document, but they will be there as we evolve through the process. So same with the department. Each department, the administration's been going through, looking at each department's submitted budget, and they have some questions they're going to discuss with department heads. You will have questions that, as the mayor said, feel free to discuss with the department heads or with the directors. They should have answers for us. I have several questions, but it's early in the process. I want to see how the document evolves. I am going to suggest, and after speaking with a few of you, I think this is a good idea. After the second reading, when we have more concrete numbers, that we have a special finance committee meeting to discuss the budget. And I'm preliminarily targeting the date of December 4th. If we can make that date work for most of us or all of us. But as we prepare for that meeting, I'd want us to have, if we have specific departments or specific questions, maybe we can try to get the right people to attend the meeting to get us the answers that we need. But I think that'll give us a period of time to concentrate on the budget, as the piece of legislation deserves our concentration and our oversight. So any input on that at all? Everybody think having a special finance committee meeting is a good idea? Is that,
Yes.
so we can do that after second reading, and we could even adjust the date. If you cannot be there and want to be there because that date doesn't work, we can talk about adjusting the date. But it is a public hearing, so we would have to give the public appropriate notice. So let me know if the 4th works for everybody. If that works, we'll, I'll need a second from a member to go along with me to.
I'll second.
So we'll plan a second. 4th work for everybody? No?
You're talking about the evening of?
December 4th, in the evening.
Might. Depends what time.
So we don't have to set a date tonight. We can set a date as long as we give the public proper notice on the public hearing. We can get some feedback. If another date is better, we can set another date. We just have to make sure the public notice is appropriately put out there so everyone knows when it is, where it is, and can attend if they want to. Any other discussion on 123-23? Yes, Your Honor.
I'd like to come on the first reading, that way you haven't looked at it yet. Take the sale, I'm available on December 4th, if anybody has any questions. I come because you are my funding source, and I just feel obligated to come talk to you about my budget, just because you're giving me money. And if you have questions about what you're giving me money for, you should have them answered. I know there's always the theory that I could order things, but I've never done that. I don't foresee myself ever doing that, because I think we can always work out whatever I'm asking for. Our budget hasn't really changed, and of course Jackie is here. She was not at work today. The building panicked because they thought I'd be on my own, but she is here to protect me. Or I don't know who she's protecting. But our budget isn't really increasing. One of the things we are trying to do is we're looking to hire a building supervisor type individual. And we have put that in our budget. Jackie has done it since we moved into the building. Jackie is not the building supervisor. She is the court administrator, but she pretty much built the building and knows where all the floor plans are, where everything is, air conditioning, elevators, which we use quite often, the floor plans and the people. But she could retire at any moment, and she tells me that a lot, so I don't irritate her. Really, she could retire right now, but she hasn't. I'm trying to alleviate some of that stress. And we don't have anybody. I think I've had some conversations. We've talked about, Sean's people, if they have a leak, they can go fix it. Well, I can guarantee you none of the lawyers in my building know how to fix a roof. So I roofed, but all I did was carry shingles. So that would replace the $50,000 that you gave us for our match. We've taken care of that. We've gone to the county because I feel that when I ask you for money, although you are my funding resource, we do serve the entire county. And I will give the commissioners a lot of credit. Every time I've asked for money from you, they've pretty much matched whatever I got from you. When I did community service, I came to you and asked for $17,000. They gave me $17,000 also. I met with them last month and I presented what we wanted to do, and they committed to $50,000 for 4 years for this position. And part of that was that at the end of 3 years, we will have the note paid off. Is it a second mortgage? One of the mortgages. And we will be able to fund this ourselves. And I asked for that extra year so I could accumulate the money to pay the position. But at the end of 3, it will have already been the 10-year process, and it will be paid off. So we can then try again to take care of ourselves. And I do appreciate the cooperation I've always gotten. We do work very hard to try to take care of ourselves. And I can't remember the last time I was here, we've just recently got a Veterans Court grant from the federal government, 4 years, $966,000. But that has to be spent specifically for my Veterans Court, probation officer, counselor, treatment, specifically for those individuals. We have our drug court, $750,000 over 3 or 4 years. Again, only for drug court, so I can't use it for other things. We get ATP funds from the state government. Those are for drug and alcohol counseling, for helping people with housing, things like that, but they have specific earmarks. So on this one, I just think it's time that somebody take over the building as far as knowing what's going on. And that's what we're looking at doing, and that's why. And it's really an exchange, because I'm not asking for the $50,000 match anymore because I don't need it. The $50,000 would be for this position, and I wouldn't ask for a permanent commitment. I would ask for a 4-year commitment like I got from the county commissioners. Any questions? Go ahead, take your best shot, whatever you want.
So would this person be maintenance or
They'd be building
they know everything?
Yeah, I mean, really, I got to give my staff credit. They do a lot of the cleanup. I mean, they clean the building. We have Service Master comes in every Thursday.
Right.
But my staff, everybody individually, even the prosecutors and the clerk's office kind of do their own thing. And so we're trying to figure out how we would develop it. But originally, I just want somebody, this morning when the air conditioning wasn't working, and we had to call Farber, it's Jackie. Jackie was in Florida after her son's wedding, and there was a leak in the ceiling. Guess who everybody called? Jackie. And so, it's just time to take those duties away from her, because I don't think she envisioned, maybe initially when the building was being built and she was kind of the building supervisor and making all the plans.
She was.
She was. She was there for everything.
Yeah.
And there's been suggestions that I name the building after her, but I think it's time for somebody else to take that over for her.
Right.
And maybe I can get her to stay a little longer. Okay.
Any other questions? I will say that, the courthouse, the police department, there were previously, there were building maintenance / janitorial staff for those buildings when we had experienced some budget constraints back 15, 20 years ago.
Yep.
Those positions were cut out and temps were brought in to try to bridge the gap. That hasn't been really effective. The police department's experiencing the same thing that the courthouse is experiencing, that no one knows anything about the building. What I mean by that, they don't know the plumbing, they don't know the air conditioning, they don't know the boiler, they don't know the roof, all those things are important.
Mm-hmm.
Having someone with that knowledge that Jackie has acquired over time is pretty important. And
Yeah. 'Cause
with the
when-
county stepping up and providing funding that they did not have to provide, it's much appreciated and acknowledged. But I do think this is a position that we've been lucky to get out from under for several years, but it's probably the right thing to do to reinstate that position. At least that's my perspective.
And
Any
if
other
you guys
questions?
have questions, I'll come back on December 4th. Don't worry. Let me know. Call Jackie. I'll be here. She'll make sure I'm here, one way or another. All
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you very much.
So on 12323, obviously, will be 3 readings, and hopefully, and we will have a special meeting, Finance, we'll have a special meeting on that. So, the next item we have on the agenda is actually ordinances 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37. These are the pay ordinances for the following groups of individuals: the city non-union personnel, city management and professional personnel, city parks and recreation personnel, city public transit personnel, clerk of courts, IT administrator, municipal court management and professional personnel, municipal court judicial and probation personnel, and the summer intern program. So, same as the budget, these are first readings on these particular ordinances, and these are the ordinances that have the pay and benefits for those above-mentioned individuals. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're currently in collective bargaining with 5 different unions, and as such, that's why you do not see pay increases in these ordinances, but you will see them as we move through the reading process of each of these ordinances. Director or Mayor, do you guys have anything to address on these particular items? I think it pretty much covers it.
I think it does.
These are a first reading on each of these, and again, I should go back and talk about, included in that special finance committee meeting will also be the ordinances, the pay ordinances, because they will be also very important to the budget process. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, these will be 3 readings. Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Ailes will be the second. Mr. Ailes, you will have the even numbers, and Mrs. Kreitz, you'll have the odd numbers on each of those. Any other questions on those? I know this is our first go-around on these. We'll have second reading. I think we'll have a lot more information, a lot more questions as we move forward. All right. The next item we have on our agenda is Ordinance 3823, ordinance to repeal and replace Codified Ordinance Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 9, Taxation, Chapter 183, Municipal Income Tax, effective January 1, 2018, of the codified ordinances of the city of Lancaster. Who wants to speak about this? Is this Amy or is this the law director?
Either of us can, really. Yeah. Let's make it a joint effort.
All right.
Okay. So House Bill 33 was passed, and it added new provisions to Ohio's tax law. And those are changes that this ordinance is aimed at fixing our own local municipal tax code. Specifically, there was one section added, 183.96, and the clerk has included all of the changes in your packet for you. So that was previously uncodified and will have to be added. And then there were some other revisions. You'll see those as cross-outs or as red bold if they were added language. With regard to the specifics of what this does to our ordinance, I will let our lovely tax commissioner address that.
This kind of just cleans up, some of it's just cleaning up language, getting everybody on the same page. One of the things that's gonna hit is kind of, will stand out for people is currently, anybody under the age of 16 in the city of Lancaster is exempt from filing taxes. So we get some teenagers, especially with COVID, you can imagine, we had a bunch of 14, 15-year-olds. They can come into our office, and because they're under that age, get a refund for the Lancaster taxes that were withheld. We were one of many of the 100 municipalities. Everybody has something different. Some were 21, some were 18, you're 16. So one of the pieces of this was to make everybody uniform. So with tax year 2024, when you file in 2025, everyone under the age of 18 will be exempt. So we have to change our language and our ordinance to adopt that. That's one of the things. Another thing is we are no longer allowed to mail notices or letters prior to the extension deadline, which is usually October 15th, of letting somebody know, hey, you didn't file your taxes this year. If we do, they are allowed to come back to us, and we have to pay their accountant's fees or whatever they had to do to get their to get it to us. So we now wait until, we're getting ready to send those letters out now. Don't know. Another change is in late filing fees. Currently, it is $25 a month up to $150. The legislature changed it to where it is a maximum of $25 flat. So if you are late 1 month or you're late 5 years, it's $25. And we have to abate the first time that you are late in filing. It has always been a practice of our office that we have extended that to anybody and everybody. Hey, we understand, things happen. During COVID, we gave everybody a get out of jail free, I guess you could say. Anybody, as long as they got their return in, just because of the building being closed. So this is kind of minimizing our efforts to be gratuitous and helping people with penalties now that they've kind of taken that away, so. The other things are just some things that really are more just cleanup, whether it's with JEDs, we have to, have public notice now ahead of time, and the rest of it's just cleanup, so that's what it is. Things they
questions?
threw in the house, things they threw in the state budget.
Yep.
Any questions on this piece of legislation? Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Ailes, you'll be the second, and 2 readings on that.
I thought it needed to be suspended.
Does it need to be suspended?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got 2 readings on that.
Okay. The next item we have on our agenda is ordinance 3923, an ordinance to accept the petition for annexation of 8.9 plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township to consent to annexation and declare an emergency coming out of economic development. Mr. Ailes.
Yes. I had a meeting this afternoon with the mayor and the law director to explain these. There's 3 pieces of legislation that are kind of all tied to this. And this is basically a procedure that we have to follow to annex this piece of land. And this particular piece of legislation is just accepting the petition. It's that simple.
Questions on 3923? Looks like you're going to ask for suspension on that.
Yes.
And Mr. Schoonover is the second.
Yes.
All right. Next item on our agenda is ordinance 4023, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum amount of $475,000 in anticipation of issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of construction and replacement of Miller Park Water Treatment Plant and the acquisition of real property and the acquisition and construction and installation of wells, raw water distribution piping, approximately 5,300 feet of water lines, new fire hydrants along Wiley Road and Magna Avenue between certain termini, each including design and engineering work. This is a finance item. Who's going to speak about that? Stephen? Were you prepared to speak about that? All right. Well, I think I can cover this one myself. This has happened in the last couple of years, but according to some research I did, current bonds are set to mature and will be retired. Additional bonds in the maximum amount of $475,000 are necessary to pay the costs associated with the Miller Park water plant. So it's something that has happened the last couple of years regarding this project. Does that sound correct, Director?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? Oh, yes,
Look,
Tricia.
This is, of course, debt for infrastructure that the water department took out a couple years back, like you said. And it's an annual piece that when you're doing a note, you have 12 months, you pay it off, you reborrow. So here at this point, they're reborrowing and just paying down the principal. So I think the intent is to pay it off shortly with this, within the next few years.
Yeah, I think the figure last year was at least twice this amount, so
Right.
we made a significant dent in that particular bond. So, any questions on this? Again, it's something that has to be done to finance the water plant. So we're looking at 3 readings. Mr. Ailes, will you be the second on that?
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is ordinance 4123, an ordinance pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 7.09.23C to provide a buffer for incompatible land use subject to the passage of the annexation of 8.9 plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township and declare an emergency. Coming out of economic development, Mr. Ailes.
It's again, part of the process for accepting the annexation of this land is if it's declared that it's not the proper use, that the property owner actually is charged with creating the buffer. It's not an expense to the city or anything like that, so. And we need to suspend this too.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. If
Yeah.
it's not compatible with current township zoning, then there has to be a buffer provided by the
Right.
property owner. Any questions on that? And what's your pleasure?
Suspend.
Suspension, Mr. Schoonover is the second. on that.
Yes.
All right, next item on our agenda is ordinance 4223, an ordinance to amend the zoning map, subject to passage of annexation of 8.9 plus or minus acres in Greenfield Township and declared emergency. Mr. Ailes.
Has to be properly zoned, so the property, what they're asking us to change the zoning to residential multifamily. So that's what this piece of legislation does.
And it looks like this one can go 3 readings.
Yes.
And I will be the second on that one. Any questions on that piece of legislation? Okay. I believe that's our last item on our agenda. I'm sorry, do we have any departmental updates? Any departmental updates, anyone? Good. Mr. President, you have anything for tonight's meeting prep?
We just do have a public hearing related to temporary ordinance 2323, which will be taking place during the regular meeting this evening.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other items for finance? Any other items for finance? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make that motion.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Okay. Tonight's regular meeting will begin at 6:45.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our 2 locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Hi, I'm Brandon Cox from Toys for Kids. Our mission at Toys for Kids is to collect new, unwrapped toys and distribute those toys to less fortunate children in our community. So we're really excited to be chosen this month by the Buckeye Cares program. That means Buckeye will make a generous donation to Toys for Kids with every vehicle sold this month. Hometown community support is vital for helping our local kids in need. Thank you, Buckeye, for supporting our kids.
I was.
If you would rise and join me in a moment of prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change. Grant us the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'd call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Here.
Mr. Ailes?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
And Mrs. Teener?
Here.
Can I have a motion to excuse President Ohl?
Mr. President, I'll make the motion and we excuse President Wu.
I'll second
I
that.
care that much.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
President Ohl is excused. We'll now have the reading and disposal of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated October 23rd, 2023.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any reports of city officials?
We do. Email dated October 25th, 2023 regarding Martins Park Bridge submitted by Assistant City Engineer Jeff Baird. Email dated October 26th, 2023 regarding October 27th meeting submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated October 26th, 2023 regarding October 27th meeting submitted by Mr. Porter. Email dated October 26th, 2023 regarding Service Committee agenda submitted by Mr. Porter. Email dated October 27th, 2023 regarding meeting minutes submitted by Mr. Ehlers. Email dated October 7th, regarding code enforcement agenda submitted by Mr. Ehlers. Series of emails regarding the minutes and budget submitted by Mr. Porter. Email dated October 31st, 2023 regarding minutes and budget submitted by Deputy Service Safety Director Carrie Woody. Series of emails regarding the Law Committee agenda submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. Series of emails regarding the Law Committee agenda submitted by Law Director Stephanie Hall. Email dated November 1st, 2023 regarding cemetery mowing contracts submitted by Superintendent Tim Dietz. Email dated November 2nd, 2023 regarding Fairfield County Regional Planning Commissioner submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated November 9th, 2023 regarding the council agenda submitted by Mr. Ehlers. Email dated November 9th, 2023 regarding cancellation of safety committee meeting submitted by Mr. Matlin. Email dated November 12th, 2023 regarding finance committee agenda submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, a series of emails regarding scripts submitted by Mr. Porter.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Do we have any communications?
There are none to be presented.
Do we have any special presentations?
There are none to be presented.
Any petitions or memorials?
A petition for the annexation of property totaling 8.9 plus minus acres in Greenfield Township was received on Tuesday, October, bear with me, I'm sorry, I didn't get the date on that. I didn't type it in. October 31st. At 10:44 a.m. from Elizabeth Seedorf, Associate of Vorst, Sater, Seymour, and Pease, agent for petitioner. A complete copy of the petition is available online or by contacting the clerk.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the petition.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. This time we have a moment for voters and taxpayers if they wish to address council. Do we have any individuals who are here to address council at this time? Seeing none, we will move on in our agenda of business. Are there any standing committee reports?
Code enforcement meeting minutes dated September 27, 2023, submitted by Mr. Ehlers. Economic development meeting minutes dated October 19, 2023, submitted by Mr. Ailes. Service committee meeting minutes dated November 3rd, 2023, submitted by Mr. Porter. Water pollution control meeting minutes dated November 8th, 2023, submitted by Mr. James. Finance Committee meeting minutes dated November 13th, 2023, submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, the IT Telecom meeting minutes dated October 20th, 2023, submitted by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Are there any reports of special committees?
There is one, the committee to replace clerk, meeting minutes dated October 27th, 2023, submitted by Mr. Porter.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of special committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Now, in our agenda this evening, we have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 2323. Could you read the preamble?
An ordinance to repeal and replace permanent ordinance 23 passed on August 14th, 2023, authorizing a joint, oh, wait a second. Bear with me just one second. I'm really sorry. Okay. An ordinance to repeal and replace permanent ordinance 1723 passed on August 14th, 2023, authorizing a joint economic development district contract between the city of Lancaster and Violet Township and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Ailes.
All right. Yeah. Do we have any comments related to the temporary ordinance?
The only comment that I would make was that we passed it, discussed it in August, and the thing that we missed, it was a timing issue. We did not have a public hearing, and that's what we're doing tonight.
Okay. All right. So the way we conduct our public hearings, there is a process that goes with that. We will give an opportunity first for the proponents of the ordinance to come forward, followed by the opportunity for any opponents to come forward to speak against the temporary ordinance. There is a silver clipboard up on the podium. We would ask you to sign in with your name and address, and whether you are an opponent or a proponent of the ordinance. After that is conducted, if there's anybody who does have anything to say, we will allow for rebuttal by the proponents of anybody who has come forward in opposition. Is there anybody here to speak on temporary ordinance 2323, either for or against? Hearing none, council has now fulfilled its statutory obligation to hold a public hearing on temporary ordinance 2323. Thank you for your attention while we went through that process. And now move into the reading of resolutions. We now first start with temporary resolution 10523.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with Truck Country of Indiana, Inc., doing business as Stoops Western Star of Ohio, according to the State of Ohio's Cooperative Purchasing Program for the purchase of a cab, chassis, and plow hitch for use by the Lancaster Department of Transportation, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Porter, but we're going to do Mr. James.
That's fine.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 10523.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second on temporary resolution 10523. Is there any discussion? If none, then we will call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 10523 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 10723.
A resolution authorizing the law director to negotiate and enter into a contract with the city of Reynoldsburg for the prosecution of adult misdemeanor traffic and criminal offenses committed in the city of Reynoldsburg within Fairfield County, Ohio, and to accept payment. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 10723.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 10723. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, that's an annual piece that allows the law director to prosecute cases on behalf of the city of Reynoldsburg, and it's pretty straightforward.
Is there any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 10723 passes 9-0.
Excuse me.
Temporary resolution 11023.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for the construction of the Independence Boulevard and East Main Street Culvert Replacement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
Yes, thank you, President Pro Tem Porter. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive this third reading of temporary resolution 110-23.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the third reading of temporary resolution 11023. Is there any discussion?
Absolutely, there is. This happens to be a combination of several undersized culverts, both on Independence Boulevard and East Main Street. And we now have found a contractor that's willing to do that for us. That bid was approximately $850,000. We're asking for $1 million to allow for some change orders. And this will, that's the reason we're asking for suspension, because some of the long lead items are the structures that will allow the contractor, once he has the contract in place, to be able to procure those items.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend suspend third reading of temporary resolution 11023 passes 9-0. Mr. James?
Yes, thank you, President Pro Tem Porter. This time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon a written record temporary resolution numbered 110-23.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Nothing further.
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 11023 passes 9-0. We now move on to temporary resolution 11123.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the Capital Improvement Fund 3020 to cover the cost of the Martins Park Pedestrian Bridge Replacement Project, and to authorize the Service Safety Director go out for bids and enter into a contract for the Martins Park Pedestrian Bridge Replacement Project. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
That was a mouthful. Mr. McDaniel.
This is the second of three readings.
Thank you. Second of three readings of temporary resolution 11123. Temporary resolution 11223.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the construction for the 2024 Street Improvement Program. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
That'd be second of three readings, please.
Second of three readings on temporary resolution 112-23. Temporary resolution 113-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for mowing and trimming the city cemeteries. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Second of three readings, please.
Second of three readings on temporary resolution 113-23. We're now moving on to temporary resolution 114-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance, increase receipts, and to amend the certificate, excuse me, certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor in the city income tax fund 2016, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of the three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 115-23. Temporary resolution 116-23.
115, did I?
We just did 115. It's
Nope, that was 114.
No, we just did 114.
Ready for
We just did
115.
114.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll move to temporary resolution 115-23. Mr. McDaniel.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the income tax funds 2016 to cover income tax refund request. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
This is first of three readings.
Thank you. First of three readings on temporary resolution 115-23, temporary resolution 116-23.
A resolution to increase receipts and appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate with the county auditor in the Special Improvement District Fund 2020. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 116-23, temporary resolution 117-23.
A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the Lancaster Public Transit Program 2021 for additional unexpected cost in the Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit as a result of the addition of the fifth loop. Offered by Mr. Schoonover, seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
As me, the first of three readings, please.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 117-23, temporary resolution 118-23.
A resolution to create a new fund, the Transfer Facility Closure Restricted Fund 8038, to set up revenue and expense accounts and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 118-23, temporary resolution 119-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the general fund 1001 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading, resolution temporarily numbered 119-23.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the second and third readings of temporary resolution 119-23. Is there any discussion?
I'll save it.
Okay. Any further? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend second and third readings of temporary resolution 119-23 passes 9-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily number 119-23.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary resolution 119-23. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, as you know, we redid the Chestnut Street parking lot, and as they did that, they discovered a few issues that need to be addressed and were unforeseen expenses, creating an additional cost of $17,961.99. This will allow us to pay the bill. That's why I'm asking for suspension and passage tonight.
Any further discussion on temporary resolution 119-23? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 119-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 120-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance, amend the certificate with the county auditor and complete a fund-to-fund transfer in the sanitation fund 6005 and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Matlin, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 120-23. Temporary resolution 121-23.
A resolution to amend the 2023 appropriation budgets and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
I'm sorry, which number was this?
This is 121-23.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 121-23. Temporary resolution 122-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Fernandez for engineering services. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Yes, thank you, President Pro Tem Porter. This is the first of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 122-23. Temporary Resolution 123-23.
A resolution to make appropriations for current 2024 budget expenses and other expenditures of the City of Lancaster, State of Ohio for the fiscal year 2024, and to establish line item transfer authority for departments. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, this is the first of 3 readings, and as discussed in finance, we'll have a significant discussion and follow-up and a special finance committee meeting to speak about the budget as we move forward through the process.
Okay. So,
First of 3 readings.
okay. First of 3 readings on Temporary Resolution 123-23. Are there any other resolutions to come before council this evening?
What do I need to do? Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council remove from the table.
She said
116. That's 116, right?
Temporarily numbered Resolution 106-23.
Second is Mrs. Steiner.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove Temporary Resolution 106-23 from the table. This is a privileged motion, so there's no discussion. Could we please call the roll?
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
The motion to remove Temporary Resolution 106-23 from the table passes 9-0. You're supposed to make a motion to. Or the third.
Okay. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the 3rd reading of resolution temporarily numbered 106-23.
Second.
We have a motion to waive the 3rd reading of Temporary Resolution 106-23. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
The motion to waive the 3rd reading of Temporary Resolution 106-23 passes 9-0.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 106-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass Temporary Resolution 106-23. Is there any discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This item is related to, actually, I'm going to kick it over to the law director.
Sure, no problem.
With that, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the annexation that Councilman Ailes spoke about earlier with regard to Metro Development, the 8.9 acres up on North Columbus Street, as a part of the process, we are required to pass a statement of services, and we had not worked out who was going to provide what services exactly, and so it took a little while to negotiate that and determine what utilities the city will be providing to the annexed property. But as a part of the Ohio Revised Code timing for the expedited Type 2 annexation, we're required to pass the statement of services that say what we will provide within 20 days after the petition has been filed. And as the clerk indicated earlier, the petition was filed on October 31st, and so we needed to have this piece of legislation ready to go so that we could suspend and pass tonight to allow the annexation to move forward at the Board of County Commissioners. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Any further discussion on temporary ordinance, or excuse me, temporary resolution 106-23? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 106-23 passes 9-0. Are there any other resolutions to come before council this evening? Hearing none, as such, we'll move on to the reading of ordinances. Temporary ordinance number 24-23.
An ordinance to establish the compensation for the council president, council members, and council clerk for the term commencing payroll 1 of 2024. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I can make motion, council pass and gross and upon the written record, ordinance temporarily numbered 2423.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 2423. Is there any discussion?
I think we've discussed this previously. This adjusts the salary for the council president, council members, but leaves the council clerk as at the same rate it currently is at. And clerk, correct, what is the figure on the council members and council presidents? It's a slight adjustment.
2024 is 10,000 and 2025 is 10,005, going from 9,500. So $500.
Thank you.
Each year.
Councilperson Tina?
Yeah, I just wanted to make note. I know we had raised it, but I don't know, in a way, with so many new people coming in sometimes, if council's adjustment shouldn't be for new people coming in. I mean, we can't do anything about it now, but I think maybe in the future, I don't know that it has to be the same across the board, but if you have people that's been in for a while, it'd be like steps. I don't know if we can do that with, like you do with employees. I, myself, have made, how much am I making? 9,300? I'm making the same amount as I did when I came in, because I have taken a raise the whole time I've been here. I write a letter every 2 years, and I don't, because I think it's more than enough what I'm making, that we shouldn't really be making more than what I'm making, because I just think it's too much. You should be doing this for the right reason. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion on temporary ordinance 2423?
Mr. President, I would just add that the reason this legislation is being presented at this time is because it must be presented before the end of this term and the new term starts. That's why it's on the table now. Or in front of us now, I should say.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
No.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
No.
Temporary ordinance 2423 passes 7-2. Temporary ordinance 2523.
An ordinance to establish the compensation for the mayor for the term commencing payroll 1 of 2024, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, sorry. The administration brought to our attention that certain elected officials were significantly undercompensated, so council has had the opportunity to take a review of that proposal, and after discussion, we recommended compensation adjustments for the mayor, law director, and auditor, which are found under temporary ordinance 25, 26, and 27.
Okay. Any additional discussion on temporary ordinance 2523?
I'm so sorry. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 25-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? It's probably my fault because I went into discussion.
You're fine. Sorry.
Do we have any further discussion on temporary ordinance 2523? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Abstain?
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
No.
Temporary ordinance 2523 passes 7-1 with one abstention. Temporary, you guys are making it difficult for me tonight, folks. Temporary ordinance 2623.
An ordinance is to establish the compensation for the auditor for the term commencing payroll 1 of 2024, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Ailes. Pardon me. There's a lot of pieces tonight, sorry.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 26-2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 2623. Any discussion?
Nothing further.
All right. Hearing no additional discussion, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 2623 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 2723.
An ordinance to provide for a full-time law director and to establish the compensation for the law director for the term commencing payroll 1 of 2024. Offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 27-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 2723. Any discussion?
Nothing further.
Hearing no additional discussion, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 27-23 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 2823.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of revenue notes in aggregate principal amount of $820,127.52 to pay the cost of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michaels Way by grading, widening, paving, curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalks, traffic signals and signs, and water, sanitary, and stormwater lines and facilities, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Second of three readings.
Second of three readings on temporary ordinance 2823. Temporary ordinance 2923.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of a revenue note in the aggregate principal amount of $254,392.13 to reimburse Flagstar Bank, FSB, for a drawn letter of credit in connection with the cost of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michaels Way by grading, widening, paving, curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalks, traffic signals and signs, and water, sanitary, and stormwater lines and facilities, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Second of three readings.
Second of three readings on temporary ordinance 2923. Temporary ordinance 30-23.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for those employees who are not members of the recognized bargaining units employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2024, and to declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 30-23. Temporary ordinance 31-23.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for management and professional personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 31-23. Temporary ordinance 32-23.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for parks and recreation personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 32-23. Temporary ordinance 33-23.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for transit personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 33-23. Temporary ordinance 34-23.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for information technology administrator, office of the clerk of court employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing the first pay period of 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 34-23. Temporary ordinance 35-23.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for Fairfield County Municipal Court management and professional personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 35-23, temporary ordinance 36-23.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for Fairfield County Municipal Court judicial and probation personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Again, first of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 36-23. Temporary ordinance 37-23.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for seasonal interns employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing during the summer of 2024, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 37-23. Temporary ordinance 38-23.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 1 Administrative Code, Title 9 Taxation, Chapter 183 Municipal Income Tax, effective January 1st, 2018, of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
First of two readings.
First two readings on temporary ordinance 38-23. Temporary ordinance 39-23.
An ordinance to accept a petition for the annexation of 8.9 plus acres, plus minus acres, in Greenfield Township to consist, let me start again. An ordinance to accept a petition for the annexation of 8.9 plus minus acres in Greenfield Township to consent to annexation and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
I have it offered
It's
by
the other
Mr.
way
Ailes.
I did too, and I've
Mr. Ailes.
offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this wrong.
You're all good.
It's all right. I move to suspend council's rules and waive the second and third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 39-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the second and third readings of temporary ordinance 39-23. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
The motion to suspend the second and third readings of temporary ordinance 39-23 passes 9-0. Mr. Ailes.
Yes, I move to pass and engross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 39-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 39-23. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 39-23 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 40-23.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $475,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of the construction of the replacement of the Miller Park Water Treatment Plant and acquisition of real property and appurtenances necessary therefore, and the acquisition, construction, and installation of wells, raw water distribution piping, approximately 5,300 feet of water lines, new fire hydrants and appurtenances along Wiley Road and Magna Avenue between certain termini, each including design and engineering work, and together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 40-23. Temporary ordinance 41-23.
An ordinance pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 709.023C to provide buffer for compatible land use subject to passage of the annexation of the 8.9 plus minus acres in Greenfield Township and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Ailes.
Yes, I move that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of ordinance temporarily numbered 41-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 41-23. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend temporary ordinance 4123 passes 9-0. Mr. Ailes.
Yes, I move that council pass and engross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 41-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass temporary ordinance 41-23. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4123 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 4223.
An ordinance to amend the zoning map subject to passage of the annexation of 8.9 plus minus acres in Greenfield Township and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Ailes.
First of three readings, please.
We'll have the first of three readings on temporary ordinance 4223. A public hearing will be held regarding this temporary ordinance, and that will be on December 11th at 6:30 in council chambers, related to the fact it's a change to zoning, correct? Okay. If there are any other ordinances, do we have any to come before council this evening?
Yes, I move that we remove from the table ordinance temporarily numbered 23-23.
Second, McDaniel.
Second, I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second to remove temporary ordinance 2323 from the table. This is a privileged motion, and there would be no discussion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to remove temporary ordinance 2323 from the table passes 9-0. Mr. Ailes?
Yes, I move that we pass and engross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 23-23.
Second.
Did we need a suspension?
No.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion to pass temporary ordinance 23-23. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 2323 passes 9-0. Are there any additional ordinances to come before council this evening?
Excuse me.
If not, we're going to move on to our next order of business. Do we have any unfinished business? Councilperson Ayers?
I just want to talk about temporary resolution 11123, which relates to the Martins Park Bridge. Between last meeting and now, I had a meeting with our park superintendent, and I've spoken with our finance chair about some of the questions and concerns I had. And in my opinion, I just kind of want to see what other people think on it, is I feel that the parks should be paying a certain percentage of that bridge because, one, they budgeted for it for next year already, so it's not like they don't have the money already. And when I spoke with Superintendent Gayfield, he told me that it wasn't that they wanted us to pay everything, he just wanted us to pay whatever percentage we were willing to pay. If we end up saying it's 100%, that's fine. I just feel they should be paying somewhere like 25 to 50% of it, given the Martins Park Bridge is only used for parks, right? If I park and I go into Martins Park, I'm using it to go to that park. If I'm using the bike path to get around town, again, I'm using the parks because the parks maintain the bike path. So in my opinion, the Parks Department should be paying a certain percentage of the cost of that bridge.
Okay. We'll go with hands first. Councilperson Teener?
Yes, I agree with him. I think, I know it was said before that, of course, that was built so that people could use Martins Park. I mean, I think the bridge was there before the trail. So once that trail connected on either side, I believe it made it the park's responsibility myself, but I know that's not gonna happen. But I do think they should pay at least 50% of it.
Okay. Councilperson McDaniel?
I was just going to say, I have spoken with Councilman Ayers and the park superintendent. Excuse me, fighting something in my throat. However, I would say I agree with Councilman Ayers, and I would be open to amending that legislation for a 25% share from the Parks Department if we can get the appropriate account numbers that should come from it. And the Parks Department has said all along that they're willing to participate in the replacement of that bridge, but one of the factors that, the reason I recommended capital improvement money, they have significant capital improvement projects that have been delayed for many, many years in the Parks Department. We all know what they are. One that sticks to my mind is finishing Rising Park paving, but there's also other ones. This would allow them to do those things next year instead of delaying those things to replace the bridge. I believe that we have some funding to help replace the bridge, and this is an effort for us to help the Parks Department accomplish two things, replace a bridge and continue with capital improvement projects within the parks. So if we can have that amended for the next reading to allow for 25% to be paid for by the parks, I'd certainly be willing to sponsor that amendment, and I have no issue with that. Again, I think the Parks Department fully supports the project. They know it has to be done, but funding is tight. Their funding sources are a little bit different than ours, obviously, because they're limited to what they get in the park levy. A lot of capital improvement projects still to go in the parks, and they're working on them. They have a list, they prioritize them, and we're going to see progress. But this will allow that progress to start next year instead of being delayed. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Councilperson Schooner.
At this point, I'm confused in general. So I had the same feeling initially when it was brought up as a as a capital improvement project. Then I had some different conversations, and I felt a little better after the conversation in terms of capital improvement, because the folks that use that bridge are not solely just people that use the park. So it is a connecting piece from your Cedar Hill Road area, your Lincoln Avenue residents. So that was a conversation that I was involved in that kind of changed my mind on the funding source, and now we're back the other direction. So, I mean, realistically, it's 50-50 makes sense. That is what my thought was on it to begin with. So if if the Parks Department's gonna step up and say, hey, we'll pay 25%, that's fine. At the same time, we're all over the board on it from different conversations that I've had, so there we are.
Any further discussion on Councilperson Ailes?
The thing that I don't understand is how we got from, there was a point in time that we were told it would cost $75,000 to replace this bridge. And I had a conversation with Steve Gayfield, the park superintendent, and he said that. That was his original comment. We are now talking about $365,000. So I'm not real clear on how we got from $75,000 to $365,000, whether it's 25% or 75% or 100%. It doesn't make any difference to me. How did we get there? And I've heard an explanation, but I'm not really sure that I'm satisfied with that explanation. I'd like for someone to say they've gone back and inspected the work that was done, and that we can improve that bridge as it exists, maybe widen it, but I don't understand how we get from $75,000 to $365,000. You had that question the last time. I don't know that we ever got an answer.
Well, I believe the $75,000 was an off-the-cuff response when the bridge was first determined to be unusable, and did not include any consultation with engineers or anybody else. So beyond that, the existing bridge is about as wide as the handlebars on a bicycle, and it needs to be wider. So the new bridge, I believe, will be 6 feet wide, which will accommodate people passing in two directions. Also, the abutments, the engineers have inspected the abutments, have no idea who designed them or how they were built, or if they're adequate for the existing bridge or a new bridge, so the abutments would have to be replaced, and I don't believe that was included in, as a concept in the original off-the-cuff 75,000.
Can we inspect them? Can we test them to see before we make the decision to just, they're gone, they're done?
Well, we have a bridge engineer on staff, and he has done all that analysis, and he's determined that they shouldn't be used for a new bridge. So I'm not sure exactly what he has done to determine that, but that's his judgment, and he has
Well, I
inspected.
thought it was that he just didn't understand how they were built. I mean,
We'd have to have him come in and answer that question directly.
that's
I
what I'm
know
looking for.
he
I didn't
had-
intend to start this tonight, it came up.
Okay, well,
But
he-
these are questions that I've had, and I think he needs to explain that.
Okay, well,
How did we get there?
he is a bridge engineer, so,
Okay.
I think we have to listen to his advice on this. So, and I would also say that bridge has been out of service for a year and a half, and we all know that construction costs and delays in getting materials and pretty much everything have gone through the roof, and, this is all part of that.
I'm all for replacing it. I'm not
So,
against that. I
right.
just want to know, how'd we get there?
The
Okay.
current abutments could not handle the increase in width of the bridge that we're proposing.
We know that for sure.
Yes, absolutely. You
Okay.
cannot do that. Now, I'm not the engineer, so I can't give you engineer specs of that. That's why we made a decision, because of the job that had to be done with the opportunity to make the bridge wider, to accommodate children going back and forth on a
I've used it, I get it.
yeah, I mean, all of that
It's
stuff. And so
really
when
hard.
that decision was to make it wider, we have an opportunity to, let's do the job right. Let's design it even a little bit better, so the price went up. I'm not happy about a lot of prices for a lot of things that we've had over the past year. It is unprecedented I've ever seen in my entire career here with the city on materials and things. But if you just look at the abutment and going underneath, looking behind it, and this is not just a quick glance. This is many trips down into the stream, looking at the abutment, and I feel very satisfied they're making that decision. If we wanted to go back with the exact same width of that bridge, we'll probably could make those abutments work, but we're not gonna increase it and make that satisfactory. And so that's why we're at where we're at. The price is what I struggle with, increasing it, smart move, let's make it more than a 50 to 100-year bridge, which is what our desire is. If we're gonna do the job, I've always had a philosophy, do it well and do it right, and I believe you all agree with that. But sometimes it's just a matter of how much money we're willing to spend. Yes.
Could he come in and answer our questions?
Yeah, we'd be
And maybe
glad to.
that would
That's all
solve
That'd be
everything.
fine.
Because I
Yeah.
know Kurt came in and tried, but he was,
Kurt
right,
didn't
he
know.
wasn't doing it. It was someone
I
else.
talked to Steve, and he and Kurt had a conversation. They didn't know how it got that high. And he was asked to come to the podium and answer the question, and you all heard him. He didn't know.
We did get an email outlining the cost for the bridge on the 25th. And it does have a contingency in there, and I know that makes up 25% of the proposed cost is the contingency. So we do have that, but having a clarification would be a little bit helpful, I think, for everybody. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Councilman.
All I gotta say is, the bridge needs fixed, and this is a sad part of government that we've been dragging our feet for a year, trying to get something done, figure out who's gonna pay for what, and when it came up that we're just gonna pay for it out of that's great, because the taxpayers really don't care. They just wanna be able to walk across the bridge, and and if we drag our feet anymore, it's ridiculous that we need to do something. How long is it going to take to have somebody construct that off-site, which is what needs to happen after somebody makes plans? You're going to be months and months of that happening. So if we can get it for next year's softball season so the people come from out of town can actually park and walk across it, that'd be awesome. But I don't see it happen. It's ridiculous that it takes this long just for us to decide, let's just get it fixed and we'll figure something out. Sorry.
Any further discussion?
I will have him here next council at third reading, and we feel very comfortable with an amendment as well, so we understand.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on any unfinished business? Hearing none, we're going to see if there's any new business. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, we have new business. We have been asked by Holly Maddy, the director of the Fairfield County Regional Planning Commission, to fill some of the vacancies that the city has on the board of the Planning Commission. And you all received an email with nominations of Felicia Campbell, our city planner, Amanda Everett from Destination Downtown Lancaster, and Rod Williams, who is a local realtor and property owner in Lancaster. You also received Rod Williams' resume.
Okay. Is there anything, any discussion? If not, we'll need a motion and a second for those appointments.
Are we voting on each appointment separately, or are we going to vote on them as one large group?
Depends on the motion.
Depends on, yeah. So if you would prefer to vote on them separately, we could do that. So,
What were their names again?
Felicia Campbell, the city planner, Amanda Everett, and Rod Williams.
All right. I'll make a motion to appoint Amanda Everett to the Regional Planning Commission.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to appoint Amanda Everett to the Regional Planning Commission. We need a roll call vote.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
That motion passes 9-0. Congratulations, Ms. Everett. She's with us this evening in the audience. Can I get a motion to appoint Felicia Campbell, the city planner, to the Regional Planning Commission?
I'd like to make that motion.
Mr. Ehlers, do we have a second? Mr. Ailes. So we have a motion and a second to appoint Felicia Campbell, city planner, to the Regional Planning Commission. We need a roll call, please.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to the motion to appoint Felicia Campbell to the Regional Planning Commission passes 9-0. Now, I need a motion to appoint Rod Williams to the Regional Planning Commission. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have Mr. McDaniel and Mr. Schoonover. We have a motion and a second to appoint Rod Williams to the Regional Planning Commission. I need a roll call.
Mr. Ehlers?
No.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
The motion to appoint Rod Williams to the Regional Planning Commission passes 8-1. Any further new business? I'm not gonna bring that. Okay, so hearing none, if you would read our list of upcoming meetings.
Upcoming committee, or upcoming regular sessions of council. The next meeting is November 27th. The meeting following is December the 11th. At that meeting, we will have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 42-23. Both meetings are held here in council chambers at 6:30 p.m. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. IT Telecom for November 17th has been canceled. I'll get that notice out tomorrow. Finance, November 27th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. Public Works, December 8th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 conference room. And Finance, December the 11th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers.
Okay. Are there any bills?
There are bills. MNCO, $175.10 for publication of legislation, and PNC for a bill paid to Performa in the amount of $1,007.99, and it's for a resolution book, an ordinance book, and a minutes book, and it's what houses our past legislation and put in council in the safe in City Hall.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion. We adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. please sign your legislation before you leave.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Hi, I'm Brandon Cox from Toys for Kids. Our mission at Toys for Kids is to collect new, unwrapped toys and distribute those toys to less fortunate children in our community. So we're really excited to be chosen this month by the Buckeye Cares program. That means Buckeye will make a generous donation to Toys for Kids with every vehicle sold this month. Hometown community support is vital for helping our local kids in need. Thank you, Buckeye, for supporting our kids.